Om Asatoma Satkamaya Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya Aviravirmayeti Rudrayate Dakshinam Mukham Tenamam Pahi Nityam. May the Divine lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. May the Divine Consciousness fill our hearts and protect us. Our subject today is I and what it can do. This is one word with a single letter that we probably use more often than any other word. It occurs so often from the time we wake up in the morning till the time we go to sleep. And even in dream, when we speak, we use the word I. Only in maybe deep sleep is the only time when this I seems to get some rest. It's a single letter, a pronoun, and when we hear the word, like any word, we hear a sound, and that sound refers to an entity. And in this instance, whoever utters the word I, the object referred to is me. So when I say I, it's me. When you say I, it's you. And so while we all might use the same pronoun I, we clearly pointing to different entities. There's a lot has been studied about the relationship between the word, the sound that is created when we utter that word, and then the object that is signified by that word. So these are three things, but they are all related. The word I, and when I say I, the sound, and then the object. Now, oftentimes when the object is outside of us, it's our senses that grasp it. Like everything else, it's my eyes that see and my ears that hear the sound. When the object is inside, then it's the mind that grasps it. For instance, the experience of happiness or sorrow, those are not objects. We don't need my eyes to know that I am happy or miserable, but that's grasped by the mind. Now, it's important to remember that I is only a pointer, a name given to an entity. The question that Vedanta tries to grapple with is, what is this I? Now, the body clearly seems to be a part of this I, the mind, the intellect. The I itself is all of these, and it is this, all the things that are collectively called as I, that we generally say is the ego. The ego serves some truly important functions in life. The first function it does is clearly I becomes a separator from everything that is not I. Now, research has showed that it takes a few days, perhaps a few weeks, when a baby is born, for that sense of I to manifest. It's not that the I is absent in a baby, because if we believe in the idea of rebirth, it's already present. We had this I in our previous birth, but the equipment is not yet ready for the manifestation of that I. But a few days or weeks later, one of the significant landmarks in our life's journey is this awareness of I. And as we have seen on many earlier occasions, while I gives us a sense of individuality, that I am someone, this is I, but simultaneously, the knowledge of I comes alongside the knowledge of not I. The moment I say, this is me, although I'm not saying it, I at once know this is not me, this is not me, this is not me. Everything other than this is not me. And slowly, as we grow up, whether or not we think about it more systematically, the awareness grows that that which is not me is much, much, much bigger than that is me. And so the sense of I and the awareness of that which is not I, you could say, is the beginning of this sense of vulnerability, the sense of uh, the stress and anxiety at the subliminal level that we experience, because we find ourselves surrounded by this huge creation, which is not me, but which is a lot more powerful than me. And so we are never really free from that fear, knowing that I am so little, so small, so vulnerable, and that which is not me is so big. And over that not me, I don't have any control. And as we shall see, we oftentimes don't have control over me either. So we are just like a small boat out in the sea, having no control whatsoever, which is not a very happy position to be in. But the first thing, therefore, is I separates me from not I. But it also gives all of us an identity. It connects us to our body, mind, and intellect, and it simultaneously disconnects us from all other bodies, all other minds, all other objects. So that's the first thing. It gives us a sense of I and separates us from not I. The second thing that the I does is that it acts as the coordinator and unifier. Imagine a big organization with lots of employees, each with a specialized job, but no one to coordinate the different departments, no one to coordinate their work. That will be disastrous for that organization. Or think about the airports. We know what's happened in Newark and a few other places. Even these several flights landing and taking off, and there has to be a control tower. Now, luckily, we do have people in control tower, but even if there are not enough people in the control tower, we know it creates, lives are at risk. The consequences can be disastrous. Similarly, think about a hospital with hundreds of patients, so many doctors, nurses, the staff, and so many medical records. And if there is no one to coordinate all of that, that can be a disaster as well. Now, same thing is true with regard to this kind of what sometimes gets referred to as the body-mind complex. Inside, it's a very intricate machine. There is a Bengali song which Sri Ramakrishna used to sing very often. Oh, what a wonderful machine, oh Mother Kali, you have created. So while we may have great gadgets being produced today and we might be justifiably happy about them, the intricacy of the human body is mind-boggling. Now, with all these different organs and limbs and things and different systems working inside, including the mind, the intellect, and all of that, the one that coordinates and unifies all the different functions of the mind would be the sense of I becomes that unifier. And so that's another great function. It is the I that makes us feel that I'm not just a collection of limbs, that I am one person. What is it that my hands, my feet, my eyes and nose, everyone doesn't have an individuality of their own. All of them are brought together, and I think I'm one person. And that is done by this sense of I. So the second thing that sense of I does, it is a coordinator and a unifier. And a third thing that the I does is that it's an identity maker. There are a variety of answers are possible to the question, who am I? Or if someone asks me, who are you? There is not just, most of the time we might just end up telling them our name. But who are you as a question can be answered in many different ways. In terms of, what our name is, where we live, our cultural, religious, national identity, our interests, one's political affiliations. There are any number of ways this sense of I can be expressed. Now, while it's possible to think of I in many different ways, we might discover that there's one or a few of these ways we tend to use more often. By that I mean, sometimes people carry more than, say, one credit cards. And then eventually you will find, even though you might have many cards, you will tend to use one card more often than others. Maybe because it gives greater benefits and so on. Exactly in the same way, while the sense of I can be expressed in many ways, we will often find that we might end up using one particular way that that might become some dominant identity. So, and depending on whichever our dominant identity is, we tend to look upon other people around us similar to that identity. For instance, now, if someone is a political junkie and is always like the idea that I'm a Democrat or I'm a Republican is so uppermost in my mind that everything I do, I see it through that lens. Then even if I see people around, the first question will be, is that person a Democrat or a Republican? Or if I'm a sports fan and my Sox fan, say, let's say, then if that identity is strong, then I will be looking for other people and wondering which teams they support. Same thing with regard to religious identity, cultural identity, and so on. This whole idea about immigrants and people coming, aliens coming in, all these issues are connected with identity. Who do I see as mine and who are like others? Again, separation. It's this I that separates that these are my people and those are other people. So this I is doing a lot of things in our life. One other thing that needs to be given some attention is what is exactly this relationship of the I with the body and mind. The sense of I doesn't own the body. It is only a coordinator or a manager, as we saw. That which owns the body is really the spirit or the Atman. The consciousness within us. It is what we might say, the divine within us, the God in our heart who owns really this entire creation, but also my own body and mind. And therefore, this true I, the divine in our heart, is sometimes visualized or thought of as being buried under layers. So just as we have clothes under which the body is buried, so to speak, in exactly the same way, the true self, the Atman, the spirit, is buried or hidden under different layers. And therefore, in some Vedanta texts, they look upon the body itself as one covering which covers the real me, the mind as another covering, our thoughts, all of these things are seen as covering, and the real me is inside them. And because they are coverings, and the sense of I thinks of them as the self, the sense of I is very closely related to ignorance. Ignorance which is what keeps me ignorant of my true nature. And therefore, oftentimes in spiritual life, the ego is considered as the one major barrier for us, before us, which prevents us from seeing the truth or reality. About the relationship between I and ignorance, Sri Ramakrishna said, and these are his words, I and mine, these constitute ignorance. My house, my wealth, my learning, my possessions. The attitude that prompts one to say such things comes of ignorance. On the contrary, the attitude born of knowledge is, O God, you are the master, and all these things belong to you. House, family, children, attendants, friends are all yours. This comes in the Gospel of Ramakrishna, page 105. And here is another one quote from the same book on page 208. Sri Ramakrishna says, I and mine, that is ignorance. By discriminating, you will realize that what you call I is really nothing but the Atman. Reason it out. Are you the body or the flesh or something else? At the end, you will know that you are none of these. You are free from attributes. Then you will realize that you have never been the doer of any action, that you have been free from virtue and false alike, that you are beyond righteousness and unrighteousness, that is dharma and adharma. Now all this we will know when this fake I or the false I gets out of the way. As long as this ego stands in the way, we don't get to see the real me. And Sri Ramakrishna therefore says that it's possible to think about this, about the sense of I or the ego, and in two different ways. One is what he called as the ripe I, and the other he called as the unripe I. So there is the sense of ego, but can we distinguish between an ego that can keeps me connected with reality, connected with truth, connected with God, and an ego that takes me away from the truth, away from reality? And so that's how we use the word ripe and unripe. And the idea is that when my sense of I attaches itself to anything other than God, that is unripe. So if my sense of I attaches to the body, which is really, we all do it and we just feel that's the most normal thing to do. For instance, now, Mom, I can say, I'm standing here. Now, if you just look at it objectively, what's standing here is this physical form is here. Now, it would sound very odd to you and to me and to everyone. It's like, this is standing here. So, but we all say, I am standing here. So I is being attached to this body. Or when I say, I am happy or I am miserable, it's these characteristics of the mind to which the I attaches itself. And it says, I am happy, whereas the states of happiness, sorrow, we generally associate with the mind. And so Sri Ramakrishna said, and similarly, not this is just with regard to one's own body and mind, but similarly, mine. So I is everything that we have a primary identification with. But we also, in life, we have many secondary identifications. Everything that we refer to as mine, as my possessions. And Sri Ramakrishna referred to that in that quote. He said, my wealth, my family, my friends, my ideas, my interests. Now, all of those things are sometimes thought of as my secondary identification. I and mine. Now, both of these, if they are connected with these perishable things of this world, then Sri Ramakrishna says they are the unripe I. And if they are unripe, try eating a really unripe fruit. Not going to be tasty, oftentimes bitter. So this unripe I can make our own life experience very bitter, very sourish. Now ripe I, if you have seen the ripe mango, a good quality ripe mango can bring so much joy, so much sweetness. So ripe eye, it is, yes, it's still ego, but that ripe eye can bring so much sweetness and joy in life. And what is that ripe eye? And Sri Ramakrishna says, if that eye can be attached to the divine in some way, if among the many different ways I answer the question, who am I? Alongside that, if I also have one answer which says, I'm a child of God, I'm a devotee of God, I'm a child of the Holy Mother, say. So any I that somehow, directly or indirectly, in one way or another, connects with the divine, connects with God, that's the ripe I. It's still the ego. But what Sri Ramakrishna points out is that this ripe I will eventually not only bring sweetness to me now, but eventually this ripe I will liberate me, will give me God realization. And so, although it's easy to say, oh, ego, the ego is the obstacle, get rid of the ego. Easily said than done. What is a little bit more practical thing all of us can try to do if we are serious about our spiritual practice is that somehow can I try transforming my unripe I into ripe I. Now, which doesn't mean that I have to stop identifying with everything else in life. Yes, those identifications will remain. But can I also, in addition to all of the other attachments and identifications I have, consciously create an attachment to God, create an identification with God, try to find a kind of a relationship with God. And no one can or should tell us what that relationship should be. It's something very personal that every one of us, we can just say, what is my idea of God? Do I believe in God, first of all? When one of Ramakrishna's disciples, who later became Swami Ramakrishna, when as a young man, he visited Sri Ramakrishna, and as Ramakrishna often did, he asked him, do you believe in God with form or without form? And his was, I'm not even sure whether God exists. So the question of with form or without form doesn't even arise. So that's something we can ask ourselves. That if we feel religion and spirituality has some place in our life, and sometimes we might glibly use the word God in our normal conversations, but sometimes it's good to pause, not necessarily when you're in the company of others, but when you're just by yourself, and to ask oneself, I do speak about God, I do think about God, but what is my idea of God? And that doesn't necessarily have to be a very clear idea. It could be quite hazy, which oftentimes it will be before we have actually encountered the presence of God in our lives. But even that hazy idea about God, the next question I can ask myself is, how am I related with God? What do I see as the goal of my life? When I pray, when I meditate, who am I praying to? Who am I meditating on? And what is my relationship with that? And if we can have some answer to that, in the beginning it could be guided by the intellect, it might be very intellectual. Sometimes it could be guided by our emotions. But either way, if there is some form of a connection is established with the divine, then that gives us a form of thinking about ourselves. So let's say if someone feels that the most natural way I can connect with the divine is I'm a child of the divine. Think of the divine as like a child of the divine mother or a child of God, whichever way one thinks about God. Then the next question would be that as I go about my day-to-day activities, how often do I think that I'm a child of God? How often does that identity of mine, I become conscious of it? How often? And again, that will depend on the amount of time I spent in different social circles. Sometimes they say that people have as many distinct identities as the distinct social circles they move in. So oftentimes when we go to a workplace, and the way we relate to the workplace, to our people that we work with, would be a different persona, a different identity. They look upon us in a very different way. When we go home, it's again a very distinct social group with which we are engaging. So the way our family looks at us and will be different from the way those at our workplace look upon us. But when you go to Fenway Park to see a game, there are the hundreds of people who don't even know me. The way they look upon me will be very different, and the way I look upon them will be very different. And so these different identities we have, depending on the different places we frequent, the different work that we do, how often does my identity connected with the divine comes up in the course of 24 hours? And this is important because ultimately, what characterizes me as a person would be the dominant identity that I have. In other words, if I see myself as a spiritual seeker or as a child of God, in order for that identity of mine to become dominant, there has to be some way that whether I'm at my workplace or anywhere really, if I'm going shopping or if I'm gardening or whatever I'm doing, that somewhere that idea that I'm connected to the divine, I'm a child of God, I'm a devotee of God, I'm a spiritual seeker, remains somewhere, that it never totally vanishes from my awareness. The more often that identity tends to come up in the course of a day, the more it becomes a dominant characteristic. Not only will it change the way I look upon myself, but it will also change the way I look upon others. Because how I see others is very directly related to how I see myself. And this is very easy to understand. We don't have any difficulty seeing others as like fellow human beings. Why is it that I'm able to see others as human beings so effortlessly? And that's because I'm able to see myself as a human being effortlessly. And this is so natural to think I'm a human being. It becomes equally natural to see all of you as human beings. But then, when we read God is our Father, God is our Mother, well, that makes all of us God's children. How often, as we go through our day's activities, and I see people around and say, these are all God's children, how often does that thought come to us? And it does not come to us because how often do I think I'm a child of God? So if my identity as a child of God, that I, this sense of I as a child of God becomes dominant, then it becomes a little bit easier to look upon others as children of God. And so this is an important point to be kept in mind, that the kind of world we see is a reflection of the kind of person I am. The way I see other people is directly related to how I see myself. If I see all around me a very selfish, corrupt world, and that's all that this world is, then there is something of that seed of selfishness, the seed of corruption is somewhere in my heart, which is why I'm able to see outside. What is in is what we see outside. If that selfishness and corruption from my heart, in however subtle a manner, if I'm able to get rid of it, then I will not be able to see. I will just see the divine everywhere. And that's what all these great saints and mystics saw. Sri Ramakrishna, you can just read it again and again and again, all over. He just says he sees the blissful divine mother everywhere. And exactly where he was staying, even among his contemporaries, those people around him, they just saw the kind of world you and I see. So the question is, do we see what is outside, or do we see outside what is really inside? Sri Ramakrishna's inside was filled with the divine, and therefore everything is outside was filled with the divine. But if everything inside is filled with the world, the material world, then my perception of everything around me, my understanding, my response to everything will be shaded by that material outlook. And therefore this sense of I is so very important. The ripe I, the I that connects us with God, Sri Ramakrishna says, that produces knowledge. And these are Sri Ramakrishna's words. He says, God, you alone do everything. You alone are my own, and to you alone belong houses, buildings, family, relatives, friends, the whole world. All is yours. But ignorance makes one feel, I am doing everything. I am the doer. House, buildings, family, children, friends, and property are all mine. And therefore we see how vital it is to see where this I is located, where this I connects itself with. And therefore, just as many of us, I imagine, who have become a little weight conscious might check their weight every day, or if you're weather conscious, you might check your weather every day. It might be good to, alongside these daily checks, or of course news, which people do, and more than news, maybe your social media things that you see. Now those things that we check so often in the course of a day, it wouldn't hurt to kind of add to that list of daily checks, like checking one's eye every day. Like, what is my eye doing today? Where is this eye located? That would be very helpful. One other test that could be helpful is to have a kind of an experiment, kind of a thought experiment. Can I, at least in my mind, separate my I from everything and everyone around me? And then ask that question again, what is this I? Because so much of my I is connected with the world around me, connected with people, with places, my interests and things. But does my I have any standing of its own when it is disconnected from everything? It does actually. It does get disconnected every night when we are fast asleep. It will one day, hopefully not too soon, will get disconnected from this whole world anyway when we die. So how much should I invest into my I connected with this world when one day everything is going to be wiped away, including my memory of everything? If you believe in the idea of rebirth, remember we had a life before we were born. And none of us remembers anything of it. This I that I have was connected in my previous life with some other body. I had a different set of friends, different parents, different interests, different everything. And I don't remember anything of that. So should my I be completely engaged only with things that one day are just going to be wiped off? So that could be an experiment. That what exactly is my I when everything else goes away? Everything, everyone, you're just by yourself on a solitary island. And not to create any disastrous scenario, But let's say if something happens and everything perishes in the world. I'm the only existence in this world. There is nothing and no one I can call my own because everyone has vanished. What is my I then? Sometimes people might say, well, it's my karma will still remain. And we can talk about it later. But to a devotee, to a spiritual seeker will say, I'm not worried even if such a thing happens, if I'm the only last standing person in this universe, because I will still be connected. Because when everything perishes, there's only one being who remains. The only non-perishable reality is God. So if everything vanishing frightens me, I feel I'll be just left alone, then I can say that my connection with God hasn't become strong yet. Because otherwise, the presence of fear, this is one of the disciples of Ramakrishna once said, same, the whom I referred to before, Swami Ramakrishna Vedanta. In his writings, one place he says, the presence of stress and anxiety is an indication that my faith in God hasn't become strong yet. We know that a little baby never passes sleepless nights. A little baby never says, oh, not getting sleep, I wonder if I'll get my milk tomorrow or not. It's completely free because the little baby knows my mother is there. My mother will take care of everything. Now, to a spiritual seeker, to a devotee, to a bhakta, if my dominant identity is that I'm a child of God, then I know that God is always present. Everything else will go away eventually. Only God will remain. And if God remains a part of my life in some form, in some way, nothing should make me afraid. And so that's what, can I somehow find a way to connect my I with this one true reality which will never perish, which can withstand any hurricanes, any kind of challenges. If I can hold on to that, even before I have had this enlightenment and samadhi, just this creating this dominant identity connected with God can bring so much joy, so much faith, so much strength, so much wisdom. And that's why this experiment is very helpful. A daily check on my sense of I, what is this I connected to? And if everything vanishes, what remains with this I? As I've sometimes earlier mentioned on many occasions, one of the ways in many Indian languages the word gets used is just like we greet oftentimes, we say, how are you? How do you do? There's a word in Sanskrit and also in many Indian languages called swastha. And swastha really means a state of health, good health. And so the question is, are you swastha? And that's equivalent to, how are you? How do you do? Are you well? And so on. But if you go to the literal meaning of the word swastha, swa means the self. Stha comes from a Sanskrit root which means to stand upon, to be established. And so literally translated, that question, how are you, how do you do, in Sanskrit would be, are you established in yourself? If my self, my I, is located on some shaky grounds, like the body and mind, if all that's where my I is rooted, then the body and mind are great instruments, but not something that is going to be there forever. On the other hand, if my I is rooted in God, in the divine, in the spirit, then nothing, there is absolutely nothing that can shake it. And so it's this daily eye check. Just like for eyes, we put eye drops. So one of our Swamis used to say, the problem, if there is an eye problem, you put eye drops and it creates it. It removes the problem. Similarly, this eye problem, the eye drop would be this false eye being dropped off. And then only this real eye, true eye, that remains. Sri Ramakrishna's Vedanta teacher's name was Totapuri. And every day he had one brass vessel in which he used to carry his drinking water. And every day he will clean it. It used to be shining. And someone asked him, why do you need to clean it every day? It's not like it's getting dirty every day. So why do you need to clean it? And then Totapuri says that the mind is like that. If I don't clean this every day, then just like the mind, if it doesn't have this periodic checking and periodic cleaning, then it can accumulate dirt and dust. And so, among all the different things that we do daily, it would be helpful for all of us to do a daily eye check, to find what this eye is, even if we don't find immediate answers, even if we don't get clear answers. But nevertheless, we to keep on asking that question. This word I that I keep on using, what does it mean? What role does it play in my life? Which is the way to think about I in a healthy way? How can I make my I strong? How can I make my I truly ripe? The way Sri Ramakrishna said, that would make our life truly blissful. That will make us free. That will take us closer to God. Om Jananim Saradam Devim Ramakrishnam Jagadgurum Padapadme Tayo Shritva Pranamami Muhur Muhur.